plasma blade went through his side before he even saw it coming. Lieutenant Jake Morrison threw himself between the assassin and Princess Vera of the Galactic Coalition, taking the hit that would have ended her life. The burning sensations spread through his ribs as he crashed into the marble floor of the Imperial transport ship. That was the first wound. Jake had been assigned to Vera's protection detail 6 months ago, fresh out of Earth's military academy. Nobody wanted the job. The princess was known throughout the galaxy as cold, distant, and impossibly demanding. She treated her guards like furniture, barely acknowledging their existence even as they put their lives on the line daily. The second wound came 3 weeks later during a diplomatic mission to the Outer Rings. A sniper's energy bolt tore through his shoulder as he positioned himself in front of Vera during a public appearance. She stepped over him without a word, continuing her speech while medics dragged him away. The third happened on Titan Station, a bomb hidden in a gift basket. Jake spotted it seconds before detonation and tackled Vera through a doorway. The explosion sent shrapnel through his back in a dozen places, but she survived without a scratch. Fourth wound was poison. He noticed the server's hand trembling as she approached Vera's table and intercepted the drink meant for the princess. The toxin burned through his throat and stomach for 3 days while doctors fought to save him. Vera never visited his recovery room. The fifth came from an electromagnetic pulse weapon that fried his neural implants when he blocked an attack at the Coalition summit. The pain was indescribable, like having his brain set on fire. Vera complained about the delay to her schedule. Number 6 was a kinetic round during evacuation from a rebel attack on Mars Colony. Jake took the bullet in his leg, collapsed, and still managed to carry Vera 2 kilometers to the extraction point. She reported him for falling behind protocol. Now, lying in the medical bay with 7 fresh stab wounds from today's attack, Jake stared at the ceiling and listened to the celebration outside. The entire palace staff was preparing a grand ceremony. Not for him. Never for him. They were honoring Vera for her bravery during the attacks. The princess who survived 7 assassination attempts through her own courage and quick thinking. That was the official story. That was what everyone believed. Jake heard footsteps approaching his bed. He didn't need to look to know it was her. Vera stood in the doorway, her face perfectly composed, her royal robes immaculate. "You're awake," she said flatly. "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice rough. "Good. I need you back on duty by tomorrow. We have another public appearance." She turned to leave, then paused. "Try not to bleed on the carpet this time." The door slid shut behind her, leaving Jake alone with his pain and a question that had haunted him since the first wound. Why did he keep doing this? The ceremony took place in the Grand Hall of the Coalition headquarters, a massive structure floating above Earth's atmosphere. Thousands attended in person while billions watched across the galaxy. Jake stood in the back row with the other guards, his wounds barely healed, watching as Vera accepted medal after medal for her survival and courage. The crowd erupted in applause as the High Chancellor placed the Star of Valor around her neck. Vera smiled graciously, giving a speech about duty, sacrifice, and the strength of the human spirit. She never once mentioned Jake. She never once looked in his direction. After the ceremony, Jake returned to his quarters and found a message waiting. Transfer orders. He was being reassigned to a remote listening post on the edge of explored space, the kind of assignment that ended careers. The kind of place officers were sent when someone wanted them forgotten. He packed his belongings in silence, his hands moving mechanically. 7 wounds. 7 times he had nearly died, and this was his reward. Going somewhere? Jake turned to find Commander Lisa Harper standing in his doorway. She was head of security for the entire Coalition fleet, and one of the few people who knew the truth about what had really happened during those attacks. "Transfer came through," Jake said simply. "From the princess herself, I imagine." Lisa stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She does this to all her guards eventually, the ones who get too close to the truth. What truth? That she's ungrateful? That she's terrified? Lisa sat down on his bunk. "Jake, do you know why Vera acts the way she does? Because she's royalty. Because she thinks she's better than everyone else. Because if she shows any attachment to her guards, they become targets." Lisa pulled out a datapad and handed it to him. "Read this." Jake scrolled through the document. It was a classified file about Vera's previous bodyguard, a man named Chris Dunn. He had been close to the princess, almost like family. Then enemies of the Coalition captured him and used him as leverage against her. Vera had been forced to watch via transmission as they tortured him for 3 days before finally killing him. That was 5 years ago, Lisa continued. Since then, she's kept every guard at arm's length. The colder she acts, the less likely enemies are to target you specifically. They see you as disposable, interchangeable. That keeps you alive. Except I've been stabbed 7 times, Jake said bitterly. And you're still breathing. Chris isn't. Lisa stood up. I'm not saying her method works perfectly. I'm saying she has her reasons. After Lisa left, Jake sat alone with the datapad reading through more files. There were others before Chris. Guards who had gotten close to Vera, who she had treated warmly. All of them were dead, killed in increasingly brutal ways, their deaths designed to hurt her psychologically. The transfer orders suddenly made more sense. He had survived 7 attacks. He was becoming notable. People were starting to talk about the bodyguard who never failed to protect the princess. That made him a target. By sending him away, Vera was trying to save his life. Jake crumpled the orders in his fist. He should have felt grateful. He should have accepted this escape and moved on with his life. Instead, he felt angry. Angry that she thought she could make this choice for him. Angry that she had never explained. Angry that she had let him believe she was just heartless when really she was trying to protect him in her own twisted way. He strode through the corridors of the headquarters, ignoring the pain from his healing wounds, until he reached the royal quarters. The guards at her door tried to stop him, but he was still officially on her detail until the transfer took effect. Vera was standing by the window, looking out at Earth below. She didn't turn when he entered. "You should be resting," she said quietly. "You're sending me away." "Yes, because I'm becoming a liability. Because you're becoming a target." She finally turned to face him. For the first time since he had met her, he saw something other than cold indifference in her eyes. Fear, exhaustion, grief. "They'll kill you, Jake. Not quickly like they tried in those attacks. They'll take you and hurt you and make me watch. That's what they do to people I care about." The admission hung in the air between them. "So you do care," Jake said. "I can't afford to." Vera turned back to the window. "That's the price of this position. Everyone I care about becomes a weapon used against me. Then let me choose. Let me decide if I want to take that risk. It's not your choice to make." The hell it isn't. Jake moved closer. "I took 7 wounds for you. 7 times I could have died. You don't get to tell me now that it didn't matter, that I was just doing my job." "It mattered." Vera's voice was barely a whisper. "Every single time it mattered. That's exactly why you have to go." She pulled out a data chip and placed it on the table between them. "These are the files on every guard I've lost."
"Read them. Understand what you're asking to stay for?"
"And if you still want to throw your life away protecting someone who can never acknowledge what you mean to her, then come back tomorrow and we'll tear up those transfer orders." She walked past him toward the door, then paused. "But Jake, if you do come back, I can never treat you any differently than I have been. The coldness, the distance, the ingratitude. It's the only armor I have left." The door closed behind her and Jake was alone with the data chip and an impossible choice. Jake spent the entire night reading through the files. 15 guards over the past 8 years. Each one had been kind to Vera, protective in ways that went beyond duty. Each one had died screaming. The methods were creative and cruel. Some were kidnapped and held for ransom that Vera could never pay without compromising coalition security. Others were infected with slow-acting bioweapons that ate away at them over weeks. One had been trapped in a failing life support system and forced to broadcast his suffocation across public channels. The enemy wanted Vera broken. They wanted her to understand that caring about anyone was a death sentence. And slowly, methodically, they had almost succeeded. Dawn broke over the floating headquarters, and Jake made his decision. He walked through the corridors with the data chip in his pocket and his transfer orders torn into pieces. When he reached the royal quarters, Vera was already awake, sitting at her desk reviewing diplomatic reports. "I'm staying," Jake said from the doorway. Vera didn't look up. Foolish. Probably. But it's my choice. Then understand the rules. She finally met his eyes and they were cold again, all traces of last night's vulnerability gone. "I will never thank you. I will never acknowledge your sacrifices. In public and in private, you are nothing more than a tool I use to stay alive. If you expect anything different, leave now." "I understand." "Do you?" Vera stood and walked toward him. "Because when the next attack comes, and it will come, you'll bleed for me again, and I'll step over you. I'll continue my schedule. I'll let the entire galaxy think you're just another disposable guard. Can you live with that? I already have been." Something flickered in her expression, too quick to identify. "Report to Commander Harper. She'll have your new assignment. You're being promoted to head of my personal detail." Jake blinked. "What? If you're going to be a target anyway, you might as well be useful." The last head of my detail was transferred 3 months ago. I've been waiting for someone stupid enough to take the position." She turned back to her desk. "Now get out. I have work to do." The promotion changed everything and nothing. Jake now coordinated all of Vera's security, managed her entire protection team, and had access to intelligence that made his blood run cold. There were 17 active plots against her life that they knew about, probably dozens more they hadn't uncovered yet. The Coalition had enemies everywhere: rebel factions who wanted humanity out of galactic politics, alien species who resented human influence, corporate interests who would profit from destabilizing the government. And then there were the Shadows, a terrorist organization so secretive that even Coalition intelligence barely understood their structure or goals. The Shadows were responsible for all 15 dead guards. Jake threw himself into the work improving security protocols and training the team with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He studied every attack, every method the Shadows had used, looking for patterns and weaknesses. 3 weeks into his new position, Lisa pulled him aside after a briefing. "You're going to burn out," she said bluntly. "I'm fine. You're working 20-hour days and you still have wounds that aren't fully healed. That's not fine." Jake didn't answer. He couldn't explain that every moment he wasn't working was a moment he spent thinking about those 15 guards. About Chris Dunn screaming for 3 days. About the choice Vera had made to become cold and distant to protect the people around her. "She's getting to you," Lisa observed. "You're starting to care." "I've always cared. That's why I took those wounds." "No, you cared about doing your job. Now you care about her." Lisa's expression softened. "Jake, I've seen this before. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. She wants to be saved. She just can't admit it." That night, Jake was reviewing surveillance footage when he spotted something. A maintenance worker on level 7, someone he didn't recognize. The man's movements were wrong, too purposeful, too aware of camera positions. Jake activated the emergency protocols and grabbed his weapon, moving through the corridors at a dead run. The maintenance worker was heading toward the ventilation system near Vera's quarters. Classic infiltration route. He found the man prying open a vent panel and didn't hesitate. Jake fired a stun round that dropped the intruder instantly. The team arrived seconds later, securing the area while Jake searched the man's equipment. Bioweapon. A custom-engineered virus that would have spread through Vera's quarters, killing her slowly over the course of weeks while doctors struggled to identify it. They interrogated the captured assassin for 3 days. He finally broke and revealed something that made Jake's blood turn to ice. This wasn't a shadow operation. This was something new. A Coalition member, someone with high-level access, was funding these attacks. Someone who wanted Vera dead but needed it to look like external enemies were responsible. The conspiracy went deeper than anyone had realized, and Jake had just made himself a major obstacle to their plans. He reported the findings to Vera in her private office, watching her face remain perfectly neutral as she processed the information. "So we have a traitor in the Coalition," she said calmly. "At least one, possibly more. This complicates things." Vera stood and moved to her window, her usual position when she needed to think. "They'll come after you now. After all of us, once they realized their asset was captured and talked." "Let them come." Vera laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Still playing hero, Morrison?" "Just doing my job." She turned to look at him, and for just a moment her mask slipped. "Your job is going to get you killed." "Maybe, but at least I get to choose how I die." The alert klaxon sounded before Vera could respond. Multiple breaches on the outer perimeter. The enemy wasn't waiting. They were already here. The headquarters shuddered as explosions rocked the lower levels. Jake's communicator erupted with panicked voices from security teams across the facility. This wasn't a simple assassination attempt. This was an invasion. "Get her to the safe room." Lisa's voice crackled through the chaos. Jake grabbed Vera's arm, but she pulled away. "I need to coordinate the defense." "You need to survive," Jake shot back, already moving toward the emergency exit. "My people are dying down there. And they're dying to keep you alive. Don't make it meaningless." That got through to her. Vera followed him into the corridor, and they ran toward the secure bunker 3 levels down. Jake's team formed a protective formation around them, weapons ready. They made it 2 levels before the attackers found them. A squad of mercenaries in black armor, weapons hot and ready. Jake's team opened fire, and the corridor became a hell of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds. 2 of Jake's guards went down in the first exchange. He returned fire while pushing Vera behind cover, his mind working through tactical calculations. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The bunker was still a full level away. They needed another route. "Service corridor, 20 meters east," Jake said into his comm. "Everyone fall back." They moved as a unit, providing covering fire while retreating. The mercenaries pressed forward, professional and relentless. These weren't random terrorists. This was a military operation. Jake was the last through the service corridor door, and he took a plasma bolt to his arm as he sealed it behind them. The eighth wound, though he barely registered the pain through the adrenaline. "You're hit," Vera said, grabbing his shoulder. "I'm fine." "Keep moving." They navigated through maintenance passages and emergency tunnels, the sounds of battle echoing through the walls. Jake's communicator fed him constant updates. The invaders had breached 5 sectors. Coalition forces were responding, but the enemy had clearly planned for this. They knew the layout, knew the security protocols, knew exactly where to hit. Inside job. Had to be. They reached an auxiliary bunker, a smaller facility designed for exactly this kind of scenario. Jake sealed them inside while his remaining team members set up defensive positions. "Casualty report," Jake demanded. 12 dead, 20 wounded, came the reply from Lisa. "We're holding them at the main corridors, but they're pushing hard. They want the princess." Jake looked at Vera, who was listening to the comm traffic with that same neutral expression she always wore, but her hands were shaking, barely visible, but there. "What are our assets?" Jake asked. "Ground forces are mobilizing, but they're 20 minutes out. Fleet support is inbound, but can't fire on the headquarters without risking civilian casualties. We're on our own until reinforcements arrive." 20 minutes, an eternity in combat. Jake pulled up a schematic of the facility on his datapad, studying the enemy's movements. They were being corralled, pushed toward specific locations. The bunker they were in now was actually a trap. Once the enemy secured the surrounding areas, they'd have no escape route. "We can't stay here," Jake said. "It's the most secure location in the facility," one of his guards argued. "It's a coffin. They're going to lock us down and either storm it or gas us out." Jake traced a route on the schematic. "We need to reach the hangar, get the princess on a ship, and off this station. That's on the other side of the facility. We'd have to go through their main force." "No. We go under them." Jake highlighted the maintenance sublevel, a network of tunnels that ran beneath the entire headquarters. "It's not designed for combat, which means they won't expect us to use it." Vera stepped forward. "I won't run while my people are fighting. You won't be running. You'll be regrouping." Jake met her eyes. "Your survival isn't about ego or protocol. The Coalition needs you alive. If you die here, everything your guards have sacrificed for becomes meaningless. I don't want more sacrifices." "Then let me get you out of here." Something passed between them, understanding that went beyond words. Vera nodded once, and Jake set the plan in motion. They descended into the sublevel through an access hatch, moving quickly through narrow corridors barely tall enough to stand upright. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by the hum of machinery and the echo of their footsteps. Jake led the way, weapon ready, every sense alert for ambush. His wounded arm throbbed, but he pushed the pain aside. Focus was everything now. They were halfway to the hangar when they hit the trap. The corridor ahead exploded in a burst of energy weapons. Mercenaries poured in from side passages, cutting off their escape. Jake's team returned fire, but they were exposed, trapped in a killing field with nowhere to hide. "Back, back!" Jake shouted, but the retreat was already cut off, more enemies behind them. They were surrounded. His team formed a circle around Vera, firing in all directions, but it was hopeless. They were down to 4 guards, including Jake, facing at least 20 attackers. The math was simple and brutal. Jake felt something shift in his chest. Not fear. Something else. A clarity that came with accepting the inevitable. "Lisa," he said into his comment, "activate Protocol 7. There was a pause. Protocol 7 was a last resort. A complete lockdown of the sublevel that would trap everyone inside, friendly and hostile, until reinforcements could cut through. It meant certain death for Jake and his team. But it also meant the enemy couldn't reach Vera. "Jake, no," Vera said, understanding immediately. "There has to be another way." "There isn't, and you know it." Jake looked at her, really looked at her, and, for the first time, allowed himself to see past the cold mask to the woman beneath. The woman who had lost so many people she cared about that she'd stopped letting herself care at all. "You don't get a choice," he said quietly. "That's what you taught me." He activated the protocol himself, and the sublevel sealed with a sound like thunder. The emergency bulkhead slammed down with finality, sealing the sublevel. Vera stared at Jake in disbelief and fury. "You just killed us all," she said. "I just bought us 40 minutes. Jake checked his weapons charge. The lockdown is designed to hold until cutting crews can breach from above. We just have to survive until then." Against 20 trained mercenaries with 4 guards and limited ammunition. I've faced worse odds. When? About 30 seconds from now? The mercenaries opened fire and Jake's team scattered using the machinery and support columns for cover. The sublevel became a maze of plasma fire and ricocheting rounds. 2 more guards fell in the first minute, then a third. Jake and one other guard, a young woman named Kate Palmer, were all that remained between Vera and the enemy. They moved through the corridor in a fighting retreat, taking shots when they could, always keeping Vera behind them. Jake's communicator crackled. Lisa's voice, barely audible through static. Fleet support is in position. They're cutting through the hull now. Hold on. Copy that, Jake replied, dodging behind a power conduit as plasma bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing. Kate took a hit to her leg and went down hard. Jake pulled her behind cover, but she was losing blood fast. Her eyes met his, and she understood what he was thinking. Go, she said. Protect her. Jake left her with her weapon in a full power cell, knowing she'd hold that position until her last breath. He grabbed Vera and ran deeper into the sublevel, the mercenaries close behind. They reached a junction point where multiple corridors converged. Jake sealed every entrance except one, funneling the enemy into a single approach. It wouldn't hold them long, but it might give him the seconds he needed. Why are you doing this? Vera demanded, her composure finally cracking. Why do you keep throwing yourself in front of danger for someone who's never once thanked you? You want the truth? Jake checked his weapon, almost empty. Because the first time I took a wound for you, I saw something in your eyes, just for a second. Fear. Not for yourself, for me. And I realized that under all that ice, you're just someone who's been hurt too many times to risk caring again. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. You push everyone away because you can't stand to watch them die. But here's what you don't understand. Some of us would rather die protecting something that matters than live safe and meaningless lives. I'm not worth dying for. That's not your decision to make. That's mine. Jake moved to the choke point, weapon ready, and I choose you. The mercenaries came through the corridor in a rush, and Jake opened fire. He took down 3 before his weapon died. Then he drew his combat knife and met them hand to hand. He was outmatched, outnumbered, and bleeding from multiple wounds, both old and new. But he was human. And humans had a reputation in the galaxy for being too stubborn to know when they were beaten. He fought with everything he had, buying seconds that turned into minutes. Every moment he held them was another moment closer to rescue. He took wounds number 9 and 10, then lost count. His vision blurred, his body screamed in protest. And then the ceiling above them exploded inward. Fleet Marines dropped through the breach, weapons blazing, turning the tide instantly. The mercenaries who weren't killed in the first second surrendered. Jake collapsed against the wall, his knife still in his hand, watching as Vera was secured by the rescue team. She fought her way through the Marines to reach him, dropping to her knees at his side. Her mask was gone completely now, replaced by raw terror. "Stay with me," she said, her hands pressing against his wounds. "Don't you dare die after all this." "Wasn't planning on it," Jake managed.
"Still on duty. You're an idiot."
"Yeah, but I'm your idiot." Medical teams arrived, and Jake felt himself being lifted onto a stretcher. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was Vera's face, tears streaming down her cheeks, all pretense finally abandoned. He woke up 3 days later in a medical facility on Earth. Lisa was sitting beside his bed, reviewing reports on her datapad. "Welcome back," she said. "You've been promoted again. You're now Chief of Coalition Security, youngest person to ever hold the position." Jake tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. What happened to the attackers? Most dead, some captured. We traced the conspiracy back to 3 high-ranking officials who wanted to destabilize the Coalition. They've been arrested. Trials start next month. And Vera?
She's fine.
Angry, grieving the guards we lost, but fine. She's been here every day, waiting for you to wake up. I'll let her know. Vera arrived an hour later, looking tired and somehow more real than Jake had ever seen her. She sat in the chair Lisa had vacated and studied him for a long moment. 10 wounds, she finally said. "You've taken 10 wounds from me now. Who's counting?" "I am. I've counted every single one. Just like I counted all the wounds taken by all the guards before you." She reached out and took his hand, a gesture so unexpected that Jake almost pulled away. "I can't be what you want me to be. I can't publicly acknowledge what you mean to me. The moment I do, you become a target again. I know, but in private, in moments like this, I can be honest." Her grip tightened. "You saved my life, multiple times. And I'm grateful. More than grateful. I'm terrified of what that means. It means you're human, Jake said, just like the rest of us. I'm supposed to be more than human. I'm supposed to be a symbol. Symbols don't cry.
You did. I saw you.
Vera looked away. That was a moment of weakness.
No, that was a moment of strength.
Caring about people, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, that's the hardest thing anyone can do. They sat in silence for a while, hands still linked, two people who had found something precious in the worst possible circumstances. When you're recovered, Vera said eventually, I have a speech to give at the Coalition Assembly. I'll need my chief of security there. I'll be there... and... Morrison? She stood to leave, her mask starting to slide back into place. Try not to bleed on the carpet. But she was smiling as she said it, and Jake knew that behind the coldness and the distance, there was someone who cared. Someone who would always care, even if she could never show it to the galaxy. Sometimes that was enough. As Vera left the room, Jake settled back into his bed, his wounds aching, but his spirit somehow lighter than it had been in months. He had taken 10 wounds for the princess, and everyone would still bow only to her. But he finally understood why, and he would do it again, without hesitation.